I always thought the hardest part about getting into my dream university would be earning the acceptance. I never imagined the real obstacle would be my own parents. They watched me believe I had failed, while my acceptance letter sat inside our house the entire time. And when I finally uncovered what they had done, one simple email destroyed the family they had spent 18 years pretending to be. If you enjoy real lifestyle revenge stories about betrayal, family drama, and justice finally catching up with people, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And trust me, this story only gets more unbelievable as it goes. My name is Anna Whitmore. When this happened, I had just turned 18. People who met my family always described us the same way. Such a lovely family. Your parents must be so proud. Your sister is so talented. I used to smile whenever I heard those comments, not because they were true, because correcting people felt exhausting. The Whitmores were experts at appearances. Our Christmas cards always looked perfect. My mother coordinated everyone's outfits months in advance. My father volunteered at church events just enough for everyone to think he was generous. Family photos lined every wall in our house, every one of them carefully chosen, every one telling the same lie. We were happy. We loved each other. Everyone was treated equally. Only one of those things had ever been true. My sister Emily was 3 years older than me. Growing up, I thought she was amazing. She could sing. She was funny. She made friends effortlessly. Teachers adored her. Neighbors complimented her. Our parents practically worshipped her. I didn't resent that as a little kid. I admired her. If Emily won an art contest, Mom bought ice cream for everyone. If Emily got an A, Dad framed the report card. If Emily forgot to do her homework, it happens. If I forgot mine. What is wrong with you lately, Anna? It took years before I realized the rules weren't the same. Emily made mistakes. I made disappointments. By middle school, I had become invisible. Not neglected. Invisible. There's a difference. Neglected children are often ignored. Invisible children are only noticed when something goes wrong. I cleaned without being asked. Cooked dinner twice a week. Helped Grandma with groceries every Saturday. Maintained nearly perfect grades. Nobody congratulated me. That was simply expected. Emily forgot to unload the dishwasher once. Mom laughed. Oh, sweetheart, you've been so busy. I once forgot to switch the laundry into the dryer before leaving for school. Dad lectured me for 20 minutes about responsibility. I remember standing there staring at the floor. Not because I felt guilty, because I had already learned arguing never changed anything. School became my escape. The library smelled like old paper and coffee. The silence comforted me. Nobody compared me to Emily there. Nobody reminded me I wasn't outgoing enough, or pretty enough, or confident enough. Books didn't care who my parents loved more. Numbers didn't play favorites. Equations rewarded effort. Essays rewarded thought. For the first time in my life, hard work actually mattered. By sophomore year of high school, one dream had taken over my life: Ashford University. It wasn't the closest school. It wasn't the cheapest. But their journalism program was one of the best in the country. Ever since I was 13, I'd imagined myself walking across that campus. I had brochures hidden inside my desk drawer. Campus maps folded so many times the edges had started tearing. I watched student vlogs while eating dinner alone in my room. Whenever things got difficult at home, I'd whisper to myself, "Just make it to Ashford." That sentence carried me through countless nights. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patel, believed in me more than anyone else ever had. She was the first adult who looked at my grades and didn't immediately ask about Emily. Instead, she asked, "What do you want?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. Not once. The question actually caught me off guard. I remember blinking at her. I want to write? She smiled. Then let's make that happen. For almost 2 years, Mrs. Patel helped me every step of the way. Scholarship applications, essay revisions, interview practice. She stayed after school countless afternoons. You belong there, Anna. I wanted to believe her. But believing in yourself is difficult when the people who raised you never did. My parents weren't exactly supportive. They weren't openly against college. That would have looked bad. Instead, they specialized in subtle discouragement. Journalism isn't practical. Lots of people write. Maybe community college first? Emily stayed close to home. You don't want debt. Every conversation ended the same way. You'll understand when you're older. I hated that sentence. Adults use it whenever they don't have an honest answer. One evening during dinner, I mentioned Ashford's scholarship opportunities. Dad barely looked up from his plate. That's 8 hours away. So? So families stay together. Emily laughed. Anna wouldn't survive living that far away. Mom nodded. She's always been. Sensitive. Sensitive. That word followed me my entire childhood. Not determined, not hardworking, not resilient. Sensitive. It sounded kinder than weak, but it meant exactly the same thing. I applied anyway, quietly. Mrs. Patel helped me submit everything before the deadline: application, scholarships, financial aid, recommendation letters, writing portfolio. When I finally clicked submit, I cried, not because I expected acceptance, because I'd done everything I possibly could. Whatever happened next wouldn't be because I failed to try. The waiting nearly destroyed me. Every afternoon I'd rush home, check the mailbox. Nothing. The university portal never updated. Weeks passed, then months. Other classmates began celebrating acceptances. Social media filled with college sweatshirts, campus visits, excited parents. I kept refreshing my email. Nothing. Mrs. Patel seemed confused. They usually respond by now. I know. Have you checked your spam folder? Every day. She frowned. That's strange. I started wondering if maybe my application had been lost. I even called admissions once. The receptionist politely said decisions had already been mailed. Mailed. That single word echoed in my head the entire drive home. I checked our mailbox twice every day after that. Morning, afternoon. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Eventually. I stopped checking. Silence eventually becomes its own answer. I convinced myself I'd been rejected. Maybe my essay wasn't good enough. Maybe thousands of students were simply better. Maybe my parents had been right. Maybe dreams like mine belonged to other families. Mrs. Patel looked genuinely heartbroken when I told her. I'm so sorry. It's okay. No, she said quietly. It really isn't. She wrote me recommendations for our local state university instead. I accepted. What else could I do? Life moves forward, even when your heart doesn't. That summer felt gray, not literally, emotionally. Everyone kept asking if I was excited for college. I smiled, pretended. Inside, I felt like I'd already failed adulthood before it even started. Ashford slowly became something I avoided thinking about. Some dreams hurt too much to revisit. 3 weeks before orientation at the state university, Mom suddenly became obsessed with cleaning the attic. She claimed we needed more storage space. Boxes everywhere. Old clothes, Christmas decorations, childhood toys. She asked me to help. I almost said no. Then guilt won. It usually did. The attic smelled like dust, cardboard, and hot wood baking under the August sun. Sweat rolled down my back as I sorted old boxes. Most contained meaningless junk. Receipts, broken lamps, expired coupons. Then, I found a small white storage box tucked behind an old suitcase. No label, just dust. When I opened it, I expected holiday ornaments. Instead, I found dozens of unopened envelopes, medical bills, insurance paperwork, bank statements, random mail, all addressed to my parents. Then my eyes landed on one thick envelope, cream-colored, elegant. The return address made my stomach freeze. Ashford University. My name was printed across the front. Anna Whitmore. The envelope had already been opened. My hands instantly went numb. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I just stared, trying to convince myself I was reading it wrong, but I wasn't. Someone had opened my college decision months ago. Someone, inside my own house. And as footsteps creaked across the attic floor behind me, I heard my mother's voice. Anna, what exactly are you holding? I looked up so quickly I nearly dropped the envelope. My mother's smile disappeared the instant she recognized it. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. That was the first thing that told me everything I needed to know. For one long second, neither of us spoke. The attic was silent except for the hum of the old attic fan and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She took one careful step toward me. Give me that. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I tightened my grip. What is this? It's old. What is it? It doesn't matter anymore. Those 6 words felt like someone pressing a thumb directly into my chest. It doesn't matter anymore. My entire future. Reduced to 6 casual words. I slowly pulled the folded letter from the envelope. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost tore the paper. Across the top was Ashford University's crest. Below it, congratulations. I didn't read another word. I couldn't. The room blurred. I remember blinking over and over, trying to clear my vision. Accepted. I had been accepted. Months ago. Not waitlisted, not rejected. Accepted. My mother reached for the letter. Anna? I stepped backward. No. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I laughed. The sound didn't even feel like mine. You told me I didn't get in. I never said that. You let me believe it. You assumed. I asked you every single day if anything came in the mail. She crossed her arms. I don't remember that. That answer somehow hurt even more. Not because I believed her, because she expected me to. I looked back down at the letter. There was another sheet attached. Scholarship offer. Merit award. A figure was printed near the bottom. It covered almost my entire tuition. I felt physically sick. My knees weakened. If this letter had reached me, everything would have been different. Everything. When? My voice barely came out. When did this arrive? She hesitated. Spring. Spring. Almost 4 months earlier. 4 months. 4 months of believing I wasn't good enough. 4 months of mourning a dream that had actually come true. 4 months that could never be given back. I looked straight into her eyes. Why? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sighed, as if I were being difficult. As parents, your father and I had to make a decision. My stomach dropped. A decision? You weren't ready. For college. For leaving. You decided that? We decided what was best. No, I whispered. You decided what was best for you. She tried to take another step toward me. I backed away again. You've always been emotional, Anna. There it was again. Emotional, sensitive, fragile. Every word designed to make me question my own reality. We didn't want you 8 hours away. I was 18. You still lived under our roof. So you stole my acceptance letter? We protected you. Protected. People always rename cruelty when they don't want to admit it exists. I suddenly remembered every strange conversation we'd had during those months. Dad insisting I stay close. Mom encouraging me to stop checking the mailbox. Emily saying, I guess Ashford wasn't meant to be. She had known, hadn't she? I looked at my mother. Did Emily know? Silence. My heart answered before she did. She knew. Anna. She knew. It wasn't her decision. But she knew. Another silence. That was enough. I walked past my mother and down the attic stairs. She followed me, calling my name, telling me to calm down. I ignored every word. Dad was sitting in the living room watching baseball. Emily was scrolling through her phone. Neither looked worried. Not yet. I walked into the room holding the acceptance letter in both hands. Dad looked up. His face changed instantly. Oh. Just one word. Oh. Like he'd been caught forgetting to pay a bill, not stealing his daughter's future. How long? I asked. He muted the television. Sit down. No. We need to explain. No. Emily finally looked up. Can everyone stop yelling? I stared at her. You knew. She frowned. Knew what? Our parents hid my acceptance. Her expression flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Then it disappeared. I didn't know the details. The details. Interesting choice of words? Not I didn't know. I didn't know the details. You told me maybe I wasn't meant to go. Emily shrugged. I was trying to comfort you. You already knew I'd gotten in. She stopped. Too late. Dad stood. Enough. No. I said louder. No, it's finally my turn. For 18 years, every argument in that house had ended the same way. Anna apologizes. Anna lets it go. Anna keeps the peace. Not anymore. You stole my future. Dad's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. My tone? I laughed again. You hid my acceptance. We made a parenting decision. You committed mail fraud. The room became very quiet. I hadn't planned to say that. The words had simply appeared. Mail fraud. Dad blinked. Mom's face lost color. Emily suddenly became fascinated with the floor. Interesting. Dad recovered first. Don't be ridiculous. Is it? It was addressed to our house. It was addressed to me. You were a minor. I turned 18 before the letter arrived. Nobody answered, because they couldn't. Dad changed strategies. You wouldn't have succeeded there. You don't know that. We know you. No, I said quietly. You know the version of me you've spent years inventing. I left. Not dramatically, no screaming, no slammed doors. I simply walked out carrying the acceptance letter. Mom called after me. Dad shouted my name. Emily didn't say anything. I don't think she'd ever imagined I'd actually leave. Neither had I. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour. Eventually, I ended up parked outside the public library. I cried harder than I ever had before. Not loud sobs, silent ones, the kind that make your ribs hurt. I kept rereading the first line. Congratulations. That single word had cost me months of my life. The next morning, I went straight to school. Mrs. Patel was preparing her classroom for the new semester. She smiled when she saw me. Then she noticed my face. What happened? I handed her the letter. She read it, then read it again, then looked up. What? Her voice cracked. When did you get this? Yesterday. When was it mailed? I pointed to the date. She stared for several seconds. No, she whispered. No. I told her everything, every conversation, every lie, every excuse. She never interrupted. When I finished, she removed her glasses. I've worked in education for 26 years. She paused. I've never heard anything like this. Is there anything I can do? I asked. She thought carefully. Maybe. That single word gave me more hope than I'd felt in months. She picked up the phone. I'm calling Ashford. The admissions office transferred us 3 times before we reached the admissions counselor assigned to my application. Mrs. Patel introduced herself, then briefly explained what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, the counselor spoke. "I'm incredibly sorry." "So was her place already given away?" Mrs. Patel asked. "I'm afraid the incoming class is full." I closed my eyes. I'd expected that answer. It still hurt. "But," the counselor continued, "there may be another option." Both of us leaned toward the speakerphone. "If Anna is willing to defer until next year, I can personally review whether her scholarship can be reinstated." My heart began racing. "It isn't guaranteed," she continued, "but under these circumstances." She stopped. "I'd like to investigate this. Hope is a dangerous thing, especially after betrayal." I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned how quickly hope could disappear. Still, for the first time since opening that envelope, the future didn't look completely empty. Before ending the call, the counselor asked one final question. "Anna." "Yes." "Do you still have the original envelope?" "I do." "Please don't throw it away." "Why?" "It may become important." I frowned. "Important how?" "I can't discuss internal procedures yet," she replied carefully. "But keep every document exactly as you found it." Every document. The wording stayed with me all day. That afternoon, while organizing the papers again, something slipped from inside the envelope. A small yellow sticky note, folded in half. I almost threw it away. Then I noticed handwriting. Not mine, not my mother's, not my father's. It read, "Emily, hide this before Anna gets home. We'll explain later. Dad." I stared at the note until the words stopped making sense. Then I read them again and again. Every doubt I'd tried to cling to disappeared. This hadn't been a panicked mistake. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been planned. Together. I carefully slid the note back into the envelope. For the first time since discovering the truth, I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking, because if my parents had been careless enough to leave behind one piece of evidence, I couldn't help wondering, what else had they forgotten? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying anymore. That part was over. I lay awake staring at my bedroom ceiling, replaying the last 18 years in my mind. It was strange how one discovery could rearrange your memories. Mom forgetting to tell me about an academic award ceremony. Dad insisting on handling all my mail to keep things organized. Emily casually asking me one afternoon, "Have you heard back from Ashford yet?" With just a little too much curiosity. At the time, I'd thought she was making conversation. Now I wondered if she had simply been checking whether their plan had worked. By sunrise, something inside me had changed. The desperate daughter who wanted an apology was gone. The person who got out of bed that morning wanted the truth. All of it. I bought a small accordion folder from an office supply store. On the front, I wrote one word with a black marker. Evidence. Inside went everything. The acceptance letter. The scholarship offer. The envelope. The sticky note. I took photographs of each item. Then I scanned them into cloud storage. Then I emailed copies to myself. I wasn't going to lose them. Not by accident. Not by anyone else's choice. Mrs. Patel noticed the difference in me the next afternoon. "You seem..." She searched for the right word. "Calmer." "I am." "How?" I stopped waiting for them to admit what they did. She nodded slowly. "I've seen students spend years chasing apologies they'll never receive." "I don't want an apology anymore." "What do you want?" I looked down at the folder resting on my lap. "The truth." She hesitated before speaking again. "Sometimes the truth costs more than people expect. I've already paid enough." She couldn't argue with that. Over the next week, I started looking through old family paperwork. Not secretly. Openly. Whenever my parents asked what I was doing, I'd simply smile. Organizing. That single word made them visibly uncomfortable. I noticed everything now. Dad constantly watching where I was. Mom asking whether I'd spoken to anyone at school. Emily suddenly avoiding eye contact whenever I entered a room. They were nervous. Good. One evening, I overheard my parents arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the house was old. Old houses have thin walls. Should have destroyed it. That was my father's voice. We didn't think she'd ever find it. My mother. What if she talks? Who would believe her? Silence. Then Dad said something that made my skin crawl. She's always been dramatic. There it was again. Their favorite weapon. If they couldn't deny reality, they'd attack my credibility. I quietly recorded the rest of the conversation on my phone. Not because it proved everything. It didn't. But hearing them discuss the letter as though it were an inconvenience, it mattered. It proved they knew. It proved they were worried. A few days later, Ashford's admissions counselor emailed me. My hands trembled before I even opened it. The subject line read, "Follow up regarding your admission." I held my breath. The email explained that they were reviewing my case personally. Because of the unusual circumstances, they wanted copies of every document I had. Every document, including the envelope, the sticky note, any written communication. I sent everything within 15 minutes. Then I waited. Waiting was becoming a familiar kind of torture. Every notification made my pulse jump. Every unknown number made me glance at my phone. Meanwhile, life inside my parents' house became unbearable. No one mentioned Ashford. No one mentioned the attic. Instead, everyone pretended nothing had happened. It was almost impressive. My father still discussed the weather at dinner. My mother still asked whether I wanted mashed potatoes. Emily still laughed at television shows, as though my future hadn't been quietly stolen, as though the silence itself could erase reality. One Friday evening, Emily knocked on my bedroom door. She hadn't voluntarily come into my room in months. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Can we talk?" I shrugged. "I guess." She sat on the edge of my desk chair without looking at me. "I didn't think they'd actually keep the letter." I said nothing. "I thought." She swallowed. "I thought they'd tell you after you'd calmed down." I almost laughed. "After I calmed down about what?" She had no answer. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry anymore." She finally looked at me. That seemed to unsettle her more than yelling ever could. "I'm disappointed." Those words landed harder than I expected, because they were true. I didn't make them do it. No. But you helped. I was trying to protect the family. The family? She nodded. Dad said you'd leave and never come back. I stared at her. So his solution was to make sure I never had the choice? Emily looked away. I know it sounds bad. It sounds exactly like what it is. She started crying. For years, that would have worked on me. Not anymore. I realized something important as I watched her wipe away tears. She wasn't crying because of what had happened to me. She was crying because she could feel the consequences getting closer. There was a difference. 2 days later, my phone rang. Ashford. I stepped outside before answering. "Hello? Anna? This is Rebecca Lawson from the admissions office." My heart raced. "We completed our internal review." I stopped breathing. "We believe your acceptance materials were delivered successfully." "I know. We also believe you never had the opportunity to respond." "Yes." There was a pause. Then she said words I'll never forget. "We're prepared to honor both your admission and your scholarship." I leaned against the porch railing. My knees nearly gave out. "What?" "You'll begin next fall instead of this semester." Tears blurred my vision again. But these felt different. Lighter. "We're also assigning you additional academic support and emergency housing assistance due to your circumstances." I covered my mouth. I couldn't speak. There is one more thing. Her tone became more careful. Our legal department would like permission to keep copies of the documents you provided. Why? They suggest they may indicate interference with university correspondence. My pulse quickened. Are my parents in trouble? I can't speculate, she answered professionally. But your documents raised concerns. That afternoon, I packed one suitcase. Just one. Most of what I owned wasn't valuable. Clothes, books, a few photographs, my old laptop. I called my grandmother, my father's mother. We hadn't spoken much over the years, mostly because my parents always claimed she was difficult. Funny how I questioned everything now. She answered on the second ring. Anna? Hi, Grandma. There was a surprised silence, then warmth. My goodness, are you all right? I started crying before I could answer. I told her everything, not dramatically, just the facts. She never interrupted. When I finished, she sighed deeply. I was afraid of this. I frowned. Afraid of what? Your father has always believed he knows what's best for everyone. She paused. He used to open my mail too. I froze. What? He called it helping? The hair on my arms stood up. This wasn't new. This was a pattern, one that had simply never been challenged. Grandma invited me to stay with her. I have a guest room. I don't want to be a burden. She laughed. You've never once been a burden. I realized then. I had never heard those words from an adult before. Not once. That evening, while my parents were at church and Emily was out with friends, I quietly packed the rest of my belongings. Not much fit into my old hatchback, which somehow made leaving easier. I placed one final thing into the passenger seat. The accordion folder. Evidence. As I zipped the suitcase closed, I looked around my bedroom. The room where I'd studied, cried, dreamed, questioned myself. I expected sadness. Instead, I felt relief. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't leaving because someone told me to. I was leaving because I had finally chosen myself. I carried the last box downstairs, reached for the front door, and heard a car pull into the driveway. My parents were home, and judging by the sound of hurried footsteps outside, they already knew I was leaving. The front door hadn't even closed behind them before I heard my father's voice. Anna! It echoed through the hallway. Not worried, commanding. The same voice I'd obeyed my entire life. This time, I didn't answer. I picked up the last box and walked toward the front door. My mother appeared in the hallway first. She looked from the suitcase, to the box, to my purse hanging over my shoulder. What are you doing? I'm leaving. No, you're not. She said it automatically, like it was an established fact, not a discussion, a rule. For years, that sentence would have stopped me. Now it sounded almost childish. Dad stepped into the hallway behind her. Put your things back. No. I said put them back. No. The silence that followed was almost surreal. I had never told my father no twice in a row. Not once in 18 years. His face darkened. You don't speak to me like that. I just did. Emily walked in from the kitchen looking terrified. Can everyone calm down? Dad ignored her. You are acting irrationally. I looked him straight in the eyes. I thought I was just emotional. For the first time. He didn't have an answer. Mom tried a different approach. If you walk out that door, don't expect everything to go back to normal. I almost smiled. Nothing about this has ever been normal. She looked genuinely shocked. Not because I'd insulted her. Because I'd finally said something she'd spent years making sure I never believed. I reached for the doorknob. Dad stepped in front of it. You're not leaving. I met his gaze. If you physically stop me. I paused. I'll call the police. His eyes widened. So that's where we are now? No, I answered quietly. This is where you've brought us. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then, to my surprise, Dad stepped aside, not because he'd changed his mind, because he realized I wasn't bluffing. Control only works while the other person agrees to be controlled. That agreement had just ended. I drove straight to my grandmother's house. She was waiting on the porch. The porch light glowed warmly against the evening sky. She didn't ask questions. She didn't tell me to forgive anyone. She simply hugged me. For a long time. Sometimes, love isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's simply someone opening the front door and saying, "You're home." The following week became the busiest of my life. Ashford's admissions office finalized my deferred enrollment. My scholarship was officially reinstated. I found a part-time job through one of Grandma's friends. Mrs. Patel helped me complete every remaining form. For the first time, every adult in my life seemed to be helping me move forward instead of holding me back. The difference was almost overwhelming. My parents called constantly, then texted, then emailed. Most of the messages followed the same pattern. Come home. Let's talk. You're embarrassing the family. Not one message contained the words, "We're sorry." Not one. Then came the message that changed everything. Not from my parents, from Emily. It was only one sentence. "I can't keep lying anymore." Attached was a photo, then another, then another. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. They were screenshots of old family group messages, messages I'd never been included in. One read, "Dad, the letter came today. Don't mention Ashford." Another, "Mom, she'll get over it eventually." Another, "Emily, what if she finds out?" Dad's reply came only seconds later. "She won't." I read those 3 words over and over. She won't. Not because they hoped I'd heal, because they believed they'd buried the truth forever. Emily called an hour later. "I sent everything." "Why?" "I can't live with it anymore." "You lived with it for months." "I know." She started crying again. "I know." This time, I believed she meant it. Did it erase what she'd done? No. But guilt had finally caught up with her. I forwarded every screenshot to Ashford, then I archived them. I wasn't interested in posting them online, or humiliating anyone publicly. That wasn't the revenge. The revenge was much quieter than that. The truth was finally reaching the people who mattered, a month later. Ashford's legal department informed me that they had completed their review. While they couldn't discuss every internal detail, they confirmed that my documentation had become part of their official records. They also thanked me for reporting what had happened, explaining that institutions need accurate information whenever a student's enrollment is disrupted by outside interference. Reading those words, I realized something important. I hadn't just helped myself. If something similar ever happened to another student, my case might help prevent it. That mattered. Life slowly became peaceful. Actually peaceful. Not the fake kind my family had always performed. I worked, saved money, prepared for college. Grandma and I ate dinner together every evening. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we simply watched old movies. Neither silence nor conversation felt dangerous anymore. Around Thanksgiving, news finally spread through our extended family. Not because I told everyone, because my parents did. Only. They left out one important detail. According to them, I had abandoned the family. Unfortunately for them, they hadn't realized who else I'd spoken to. Grandma, Mrs. Patel. A few relatives who had quietly wondered for years why I always looked so uncomfortable at family gatherings. When questions started being asked, their story unraveled quickly. An aunt called me one evening. "Anna," she said gently, "I wish we'd known. I didn't know how to tell anyone." "You shouldn't have had to." That sentence stayed with me. Children shouldn't have to convince adults they're telling the truth. Christmas arrived. For the first time in my life, I didn't spend it in my parents' house. Grandma baked cinnamon rolls before sunrise. We opened inexpensive presents, laughed over burned cookies, watched old black and white movies. There were no arguments, no comparisons. Nobody asked why I wasn't more like Emily. It was quiet, peaceful, real. I realized then that I'd spent years confusing tension with family. They aren't the same thing. The following August, exactly 1 year after finding the letter, I stood beneath Ashford University's stone entrance. Students rushed across campus carrying boxes and backpacks. Parents hugged their children goodbye. I reached into my backpack. Inside was the original acceptance letter. Still folded, still slightly wrinkled from that afternoon in the attic. I looked at the date, then quietly smiled. "You were late," I whispered, "but you still got me here." I folded it again and slipped it back into the folder marked evidence. Not because I needed proof anymore, because I never wanted to forget how close I came to believing someone else's version of my life. People sometimes ask whether I ever forgave my parents. The honest answer is, I stopped asking myself that question. Forgiveness isn't something you owe the people who hurt you. It's something you decide for yourself, if it ever becomes necessary. What I did owe myself was honesty, boundaries, and the freedom to build a life that wasn't controlled by fear. My parents didn't lose me because I left home. They lost me the day they decided my future belonged to them instead of me. The acceptance letter changed my life, but not because it got me into college, because it finally proved that the voice telling me I wasn't good enough had never been mine. If you've ever been underestimated, manipulated, or made to feel like your dreams didn't matter, remember this. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't ruining someone else's life. It's refusing to let them ruin yours. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more revenge stories, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you discovered your own parents had stolen your future?